Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
And as we do every week, we break down the latest with the Utah Jazz, get you ready for the week coming up ahead. It includes the Q&A that we like to do based on your Twitter questions. We talk about the games the Jazz have played, what they've got coming up this week, and then otherwise just kind of the big weekly news. So, Chandler, let's talk about what happened with the Jazz this last week. They go 1-1, light week, only 2 games. They've been on a 3-day rest for the first time after playing either every night or every other night to start the year so far. But the Jazz fall to the Pacers, got blown out 134-118. Game didn't even feel like it was that close. But they bounced back, and they beat the Grizzlies 127-121 in what wasn't a great game, but a very fun game to watch.
Jazz only beat the Grizzlies by 6 points in that game, but it felt like bigger. They were up by 20 at one point in the game. Grizzlies ended up fighting back in the second half. And if you want to look at the bright side, you can say the Jazz won the more important of the games. In-season tournament, first year here. And then as well, the Jazz are playing their first home in-season tournament game tonight against the Trailblazers. Fans will get to see the new purple court, maybe the city jerseys, not sure about that quite yet. But 1-1 could be worse.
Yeah, you're happy to get your first road win of the season. That was important. The Grizzlies were also very hungry. In fact, I thought that was a game the Jazz were going to lose because the Grizzlies were winless at home. Needed to find a way to break that streak. In fact, I still don't think they've won a game at home. So they were hungry. And then, yes, they had all the momentum after Jaren Jackson Jr. got ejected, erased a 21-point lead, tied the game with 6 minutes left to go. But the Jazz kind of toughened up. They started getting defensive stops. They were blocking a lot of shots. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Memphis is so tiny when they don't have Steven Adams, John Morant, or Jaren Jackson Jr. after he got tossed. But Jordan Clarkson made got some big steals and made some big plays and kind of found his rhythm as the Jazz got that win. And I think they felt pretty good about it and they were excited about it. You could kind of feel the catharsis in the locker room after the win. You saw some of the videos. But going into the Grizzlies game, the big story was that Walker Kessler is going to be out for 2 weeks with that left elbow injury, at least 2 weeks. That's when he's going to be re-examined. So I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up stretching to the end of the month or later. And then the Jazz decided at that time, because they were already, I don't know if they were related. In fact, I don't think they were, because my understanding is Will Hardy told Keontae George the day before the Walker Kessler injury was announced, before he even got the MRI, that he was going to be starting in place of Talen Horton-Tucker. And then with Kessler out, a little surprising they moved Ochai Agbaji into the starting lineup, which is actually something we had teased last week on the show.
A few big storylines for the Jazz games this past week. One, Jordan Clarkson's resurgence. Like you said, he puts up 26 and 33 in the 2 games last week, which is big for him to get some of his confidence back. And then Ochai, in the in-season tournament game against the Grizzlies, he puts up 15 points on 6 for 8, 3 for 5 from 3, adds 6 rebounds. I think that was a fantastic game from him. Definitely his best game of the year so far. But then let's move over to Keontae. I think in the Summer League, a lot of fans were like, oh, we got this young scoring guard. He was pouring in buckets from deep, getting to the rim, being aggressive. And not to say he hasn't been aggressive, but the best part specifically last week from him since he's been starting was his playmaking. He's put up, let me check really quick. He put up 11 assists in the in-season tournament game against the Grizzlies.
It was 9 against Indiana.
Yeah, and then 9 against Indiana, so averaging 10 assists a game, which was big. And I saw you pointed out on your Twitter, he threw a couple of crazy passes, like the little left-hand scoop down through the lane, and he's just been looking confident. And I think that last week I said this, the Jazz need a playmaker, and Keontae sort of stepped up and showed that maybe he could be that guy for the Jazz.
And most importantly, he's not turning the ball over. 20 assists, 3 turnovers in that stretch. That's really what you want, because this team isn't even getting shots up because they're turning the ball over so quickly. So that's been a major area of concern for the Jazz, but he has fixed that. He is not shooting well. Since he's moved to the starting lineup, Keontae George is shooting 25% from the floor and 22% from 3. Again, I don't think that's going to be a problem for him going forward, because we saw what he did in Summer League. He has that ability to get hot and score well. But I think it is worth noting he shot 37% in college and 33% from 3. So it's not like the bigger sample size we have, he's not been a great shooter. Now, playing weird roles in college. He's really known as a difficult shot maker, which sometimes means he just takes difficult shots because he has to, because he doesn't have like the easy layups at the rim because he gets pushed off his spot. So something's going on. He's going to have to become a much better shooter. You just can't be inefficient with the ball in your hands, even if you were a really great passer. I mean, the league has had a lot of those guys. Brevin Knight, historically, guys who can really pass the ball, but if you can't shoot, you really can't be on the floor. So it's not an issue yet, but it could be, and I'm going to be tracking that, but I suspect he will gain some confidence. And look, he did hit a big 3 late in the game against the Grizzlies when I think they had tied it up. He was I think he only had one shot made at that point, and then he bangs a big three, and they needed it. So I still believe in that aspect of his game, but he's got to show it. You can't just kind of assume it's going to happen if he never shows it. That's a little bit difficult, but it was pretty monumental. I know the Jazz wanted to make this switch. There was not really much of a secret that eventually at some point this season he was going to be starting. I didn't expect it to happen 8 games into the year.
Yeah. Definitely not. Looking at the Jazz stats, last week we were pointing out that a lot of the players on the Jazz roster, specifically the guards, were shooting under 40%, not good efficiency from a lot of the players. But looking now, you have Jordan Clarkson and Keontae George sneaking up to that 40% mark, which is big. And you have Ochai above 40% now. He was down to like 33% from the field or something like that. And then you have John Collins at 55%, Walker Kessler at 55%, Kelly Olynyk shooting 60% from the floor earlier on. That's big. But yeah, last week, I would say it looked a lot better than the 1-3 week from the week before. And then going into next week, we have, again, the Portland game tonight. And then on Friday, another home game against the Phoenix Suns. That's also an in-season tournament game. And then on Sunday, another game against Phoenix at home. That is just a regular season game, though.
Phoenix should be fully healthy at this point. They're expected to debut their big three coming up on Wednesday, tomorrow night against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves are playing the Warriors tonight without Steph Curry, but the Timberwolves are surging. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we look around the NBA in a moment. But yeah, tough stretch for the Jazz. They should beat Portland. Portland doesn't have Scoot Henderson. They don't have Malcolm Brogdon. They don't have Anthony Simons. We know that Robert Williams is out for the season with that knee injury. So they are shorthanded on top of already being bad. But to be fair, Portland has a better record than the Jazz. But this is a game the Jazz should win. And if you lose tonight, this is your worst loss of the season.
Yes, definitely. And when you look at the West Group A right now, funny enough, the Jazz are at the top of that with a plus 6 point differential and 1-0. But if you want to have a chance to move on to Vegas, you need to beat the Grizzlies and you need to beat the Trailblazers because the games against the Lakers and the Suns are going to be much more difficult. And it would help if it was a blowout tonight as well because you need to get that point differential because that could potentially be a tiebreaker if, say, you and LA are both 2-2 or 3-1 or something like that.
Or if you get one of the 2 wild card spots.
Yes.
Again, there are 6 groups in kind of what they call cup play, this opening round. There are 6 groups made up of 5 teams. That's the full 30 in the NBA. The top 6, the winners of each group advance, and then 2 wild cards advance. So the Jazz could either win the group outright or still get the wild card, and yes, they will go down to point differential with that as well. To start the in-season tournament right now, the Jazz, the Blazers, and the Lakers are all 1-0, and the Grizzlies and the Suns are 0-1. And none of these teams are great. In all honesty, I mean, the Suns are 4-6, the Lakers are 5-5, Trailblazers are 3-6, Jazz are 3-7, and the Grizzlies are the worst team in the NBA at 2-8. So what looked like a murderer's row potentially when you got this draw for the Jazz actually might be the easiest draw to win of any of them so far out there for the Jazz. So yeah, you steal a win over the Suns on Friday. Maybe you beat the Lakers on the road in a game where not everyone's playing well, but it sounds like everyone's going to be out there playing. Guys do want to win, and guys do want to win this $500,000 that each player gets for winning. But the pathway is there, which I wasn't sure of, but you got to win tonight. Otherwise, there's probably no hope to win or at least get to the Cup tournament games in Las Vegas if you don't win tonight.
Yeah, and if I say the most important game is this game against Phoenix coming up on Friday because the Lakers beat Phoenix in their first game. So if you can also beat Phoenix, then basically the only person who you have to worry about is the Lakers, and then you can still steal a wild card spot if you have a good enough record and point differential.
So these games are going to be interesting. The Jazz going to continue to evolve without Walker Kessler and try and figure out what that looks like. That's a big story because Walker was playing really bad to start the year, and all of the Jazz worst kind of 2-man plus lineups featured Walker Kessler, and that was because the starting lineup was so bad. But we even talked to Will Hardy yesterday after practice, and Will said, the defense has gotten better since Walker went out. And that's not because Walker was bad. He said he thinks it's a result of all the players playing harder because they didn't have Walker behind them to clean it up and just default to saying, well, Walker's back there, I don't have to do my job. And by the way, this happened with the Jazz early in the Donovan Mitchell era, where Rudy Gobert got hurt, and the Jazz said, man, we better learn how to play defense without him. And it ended up being one of their better seasons. I think it's when they beat Oklahoma City that first year, if I remember the math correctly and kind of my dates. Jazz came back and were playing really hot because they weren't that good to start the year. And then everyone's playing really good defense to close the season, and the Jazz go in and beat the Thunder largely because at that point they were a defensive-minded team with Ricky Rubio and Royce O'Neal, et cetera. Maybe you get a little bit of that. Maybe everyone learns to play a little bit better defense without Walker Kessler. He comes back, a week from now, which is when the injury was announced last week at this time, or maybe it's, maybe it's December, but the rest of the team is playing a little bit harder. minding their P's and Q's a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe that's the wrong term. Maybe I should say dotting their I's and crossing their T's. And, Walker comes back and doesn't have to do everything, and all of a sudden the team plays a lot better on the defensive end, which has still been the major issue.
Even though the defense has been better, there's been better rotations, and it's looked better overall, I was a little bit worried in the Pacers game because you saw Miles Turner go off early, and then even Jalen Smith put up 16 and 11, which is a crazy good game for him.
Right.
Larry Markkinen at center in that game with John Collins at the 4. It was a little bit rocky, but I think that Walker could come back, like you said, slide in, and if everyone's putting in a little bit more effort, maybe the Jazz can turn the defense around a little bit.
Well, the Jazz right now have the 5th or 16th ranked offensive rating, so they're fine offensively. They're middle of the pack. The 3rd worst defensive rating at 119.1, only ahead of the San Antonio Spurs and the Charlotte Hornets. And then their net rating is actually 2nd worst in the NBA, only ahead of the San Antonio Spurs, who are also 3-7 and actually behind Charlotte. So the defense has still not been good. And you gave up 121 points to a Memphis team that can't score on anybody and was missing their best player in Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yes.
And Desmond Bane was going off for 3 of the 4 quarters until the Jazz really buckled in. But he had, 37 in that game, right? I mean, he just went off. So the Jazz haven't fixed it. They've got a lot of work to do, and we'll see if they can do that a little bit more this week when they take on Portland, Phoenix, and Phoenix. When we come back, let's take a look around the NBA. We will give you our weekly grades for the Utah Jazz. We can talk a little Bryce Sensabaugh and a little Taylor Hendricks, and, of course, answer the mailbag questions. Stick around. More Jazz notes from KSL Sports coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson, Chandler Holt. Appreciate you subscribing, leaving us a review, rating us. We always like and appreciate that wherever you get your podcast. Just search Jazz Notes, or you can find it at kslsports.com. All right, Chandler, let's actually talk a little bit about the Salt Lake City Stars. They've played 2 games so far, and they are important because we've seen both Bryce Sensabaugh and Taylor Hendricks play quite a bit. Last night they blew out the G League Ignite, who looked terrible. I actually watched some of that game. I mean, they beat them by 59 points. It was a joke. But in the first 2 games right now, Bryce Sensabaugh is averaging 26 points a game. He's shooting really efficiently. Turned the ball over way too much yesterday. He had 6 turnovers. But I think he's averaging 6.5 assists and 5 rebounds, 6 rebounds. And Taylor Hendricks is playing fine. He was sick in the first game, so he only played 14 minutes, but bounced back last night and had a good game. Wasn't great, but it did all the things you want to see him do.
Yeah, Sensabaugh almost had a triple-double in that first game. He dropped 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists, was on the floor for a lot of that game. I thought that was really impressive. I don't know how much you want to take away from that based on the competition, but regardless, it's a good sign, especially when he's hitting his shots, because that is what translates to the NBA floor.
And I don't know what to take away in a game when you score 160 points like they did, 158 last night against the G League Ignite, and try and pretend that the individual stats matter, or that the stats really ever matter all that much in the G League. Last night, Taylor Hendricks had 19 points, 7 of 15 shooting, 2 of 6 from 3, 3 blocks, 3 steals, 5 rebounds, 0 assists. Maybe you'd like to see him on a game when your team scores 1,000 points. Maybe he gets 1 assist. That's probably not too much to ask. But no, those are the things you want to see him do. He checks the boxes. He blocks shots. He hits threes. He runs the floor. He actually had a couple of nice plays with the ball in his hands in transition. I thought that was promising. And, I mean, Bryce Sensabaugh right now, he was 5 of 12 from 3 in his first game. He's 4 of 6 in the second game. So he is shooting well. I did ask Will Hardy about it yesterday before the game. She's what are you trying to see from Bryce? What are you trying to see from Taylor Hendricks? I actually wrote about it at kslsports.com if you want to go read the full quotes there and get the full story. The thought is, hey, Bryce, it actually doesn't matter how much you score. Yeah. We know you can score. You've always scored. You scored at Ohio State. What else can you do? Which is where I actually think the assists are important. I think they want to see him on the defensive end buckle down. I think they want to see his focus improve. I think they want to make sure he is moving the ball. And, he's actually thrown some very exciting passes, hook passes, cross-court passes, swing passes, skip passes, all the things you actually kind of want to see. And I tweeted last week, Keontae George is the only player on the Jazz who will throw a skip pass, meaning literally doesn't only throw it to the guy right next to him. Yep. He will skip a player on the perimeter to make that pass. Bryce Sensabaugh's thrown some interesting passes. That's a good sign.
Yes.
If he's a willing ball mover in addition to being able to shoot threes, which I had said, I think when we started this podcast, actually his pathway to getting on the floor is probably being a really reliable three-point shooter. That's the best way to become an NBA player really quickly. You can be not great at a lot of things, but if you hit threes at a consistent rate, like Simone Fontecchio gets a chance to be in the NBA because he's a good shooter. Bryce Sensabaugh could do that, and then can he rebound, which he did well in college? Can he play defense? Those are all beneficial. But the value is Taylor Hendricks. With all due respect to Bryce Sensabaugh, like a 28th pick in the draft, if he busts, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Taylor Hendricks, the number 9 overall pick. You want him to play well. He did have a plus 38 plus minus in 27 minutes. So they were better with him on the floor.
I love this quote from Will Hardy talking about Bryce Sensabaugh. He says, Bryce is somebody that has a natural scoring ability, but I want him to try and expand his own vision of himself as he moves through these next couple of months, which is exactly as you said. If he can improve his playmaking, his defense, then that's his pathway to getting NBA minutes.
Yeah, think of yourself differently. Don't just think of yourself as a scorer, which is what you have done historically. Think of yourself as something greater than that, more than that, and improve your game. And I do think Taylor Hendricks is probably a role player type of player. I'm not sure he's got superstar, go-to scoring potential. But you know what? Look at what the Nuggets did last year. Michael Porter Jr., not a star. Aaron Gordon, not a star. But they were, this is so cliche, stars in their role.
Yes.
Right? Like Aaron Gordon was the number 3 best player on that team. He drew the toughest defensive assignment every night. He rebounded, he passed the ball, he hit some important shots. Like that's probably what you need from Taylor Hendricks. And if he can be that, that's still a very good draft pick. Aaron Gordon was a good draft pick. Did Orlando get out of him what they wanted? No, but he has a championship ring and was in the starting lineup and was crucial. Well, that's more than most players do in their NBA career. So if you can get something like that from Taylor Hendricks, I think you'll be happy.
The more I watch Taylor Hendricks, the more I like your comparison from a few weeks ago, which was Jonathan Isaac of the Orlando Magic. I think that if that could be his floor and he just brings that energy defensively, runs the floor, can occasionally spot up and hit a three, then I think you're happy with it. I know he's a top 10 pick, and when you use a top 10 pick on a player, you want him to be at least like an all-star maybe, like that's what you're hoping for. But in all reality, that isn't very likely. There are a lot of drafts where there's maybe 2 or 3 all-stars in the whole draft, right? So if you can get a star in their role type of player, then you should be happy with that.
Oh, by the way, you also got a taste of why people were saying this might not be a great draft last night, because you had like Ron Holland, you had some of these other guys that are expected to be top 10 picks playing for the G League Ignite, and they looked unplayable. Not just the player, I mean the whole team looked unplayable. No one looked like they were playing together, and they are still actually missing 2 guys, or at least 1 guy who's expected to go in the top 10 as well. So I'm not going to get too dorky about the draft yet. I still think the Jazz probably have a top 10 pick in this draft, so I will certainly pay attention to it as it comes, but I'm not worried about a November G League Ignite performance. But that is why you've heard kind of those early rumors that this is not a very good draft. All right, should we do some Jazz grades real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
We like to do this. We break down kind of what they've done over the week. We kind of let it bleed into what they've done all season long. You know, we're not going to ignore if Lowry has a bad shooting week that he's been a good player and he's still probably going to get a B+ most weeks or better. But it really is kind of about focusing on what's happened the last couple of games. Jazz have only played 2, which is a really small sample size. But we can go to the veterans. We gave them, what, a C- last week?
Yeah, about a C average last time.
They were way better than that this year.
Yes.
This week. They played a lot better over the last 2 games. Namely, Jordan Clarkson, who was the Jazz leading scorer over the last 2 games. He was at 29.5 points. He shot 50% from the floor. He shot 37% from 3. 4.5 assists. He's still turning the ball over way too much. 4.5 turnovers. But he needed to not be shooting 4 of 16 for 13 points. And he didn't. He was really a good go-to scorer for the Jazz, and obviously they needed it.
Yeah, and also John Collins, he's shooting about 75% in the past week, and he was 3 for 3 from 3 in the game against Memphis and 1 for 2 in the game against Indiana. I would say maybe like a flat B this week.
And Lowry was averaging 25 points and 8 rebounds, and he shot 55% from the floor and 50% from 3. Like, Lowry was awesome.
Yep.
Still. Colin Sexton was fine. So, yeah, when we're talking about the veterans, the guys who have been around a little bit longer, and I actually wrote a whole story yesterday about John Collins and actually how well he's playing right now. He's shooting 43% from 3. Like, he's the second best three-point shooter on the team, only behind Lauri Markkanen, and he's taking 3.5 attempts. He looked better without Walker Kessler on the floor, which is not surprising. We talked about that potentially being the issue, but kind of playing small ball 5. It's not perfect. He's not a great defensive player still, but I think he's understanding his role. And after some early season struggles, he's really playing well, and I think deserves some praise. So I would give him, B. Like, maybe, I mean, they got smoked. They got smoked by Indiana.
Yeah.
So I can't overlook that. And Jordan Clarkson's turnovers are still an issue, and they're not good defensively. But it's such an improvement over last week that almost feels like B is not good enough. I'm going to give him a B+.
Okay.
I'll give him a B+. Young players. Last week we also gave him, a C?
Yes, around a C, because it was basically Keontae, and Keontae wasn't even looking as good as he was, maybe even this past week. So,
it's hard because Walker Kessler hasn't played, and that's a failing grade. You know what I mean? Those injuries, it's not his fault, but it's an incomplete at the best. But Ochai also played a lot better.
Yes.
So I hate to go boring again and be like, that's probably a B+.
Yeah.
Keontae moves in the starting lineup. I would arguably give him I would borderline give him an A if he hadn't shot so poorly.
I'm gonna go with a flat B again, just because in the first game, because we're basically, for the most part, looking at Ochai and Keontae. The loss to Indiana, Ochai just shot 1 for 3, 3 points, 3 turnovers, 4 rebounds, -3 from the floor. So I'd say B, but it definitely is also looking a lot better than the week before.
And I will say this when it comes to Keontae George, and I kind of talked earlier in the podcast about his numbers and his poor shooting percentages, 37% from the floor and 30% from three. Again, when you're dealing with such small sample sizes, that one really bad game, like he had 2 of 12, his worst game shooting so far this season, will sink everything, because going into last week, he was shooting 43% from three and 43% from the floor, and 33% from three, which is good enough. It's not great, but for a rookie who's taking a lot of shots, that's fine. And he still has hit a 3 in every game so far. Those are actually the types of things I try and look at. Like, do you go 0 of 6 and 0 of 4 and then 5 of 7 and it looks like you're a 40% three-point shooter? It's like, no, you went 0 of 6 and 0. That's a bad sign to me. He knocks one down every game. He had his one crazy game where he took 8 against Phoenix. He took 6 against Memphis over the weekend, but he's hitting a 3 every game. I think that's a good sign. And he's only broken double digits scoring once. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
But the double digit passing is a much bigger deal. And averaging 10 assists over the last 2 games is good. And then what you said about Ochai. Ochai having a breakout game, hitting some shots. Again, you wish this wasn't the case. You wish they would their impact on the defensive end, rebounding, etc., would be the same whether or not they make shots. But human nature, they want to see the ball go in. They're going to play harder, especially young players. And I thought Ochai did that.
Moving on, next up we have standings. Last week we gave this an F, and I think we still got to stay pretty close to that because the Jazz are still 3-7. I believe they are 14th in the West still.
14th in the West. Yeah, D-.
Yeah, I was about to say D- or D, just because they're at the top of West Group A for the in-season tournament.
And they did win a game. They won their last game, so they're not an F, but I'll still give them a D. And yeah, you would have been happier had you beat Indiana. You would have been 4-6, and by the way, you would have been tied at like 10th, 9th in that spot. You would have been tied with the Suns and the Pelicans, and that would have been fine, but you didn't. So D, I'm great with that. And then a new one we're adding. We didn't do this last week, but we should. The fun factor of the team. Memphis game was great fun. Indiana game was dreadful.
Yes.
But Keontae's really fun, and he adds a watchable factor to this that the team did not have when it was Talen Horton-Tucker starting, with all due respect. And Jordan Clarkson's fun when he shoots 25 times and scores 30 points. You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be efficient. It doesn't have to win you a bunch of games, but it is fun to look at. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the Russell Westbrook Fun Factor Award. Like, are you fun to watch, even if you're not necessarily winning? I thought they were fun. I'm going to give them a B-.
I like that. If we were to do this last week, I think me and you would probably be in the F and D range, talking about the 1 and 3 week.
Pretty unwatchable.
Yeah.
Pretty unexciting to watch. And I literally woke up this morning being like, okay, what do I have to do today? I have to go cover the Utah Jazz. Oh, Keontae George is playing. That's fun.
Yes.
Like I'm anticipating watching his growth, and I don't know what's going to happen. If he's good or if he's going to be bad, it will still be fun.
But yeah, there was a lot of fun things in this past week, including a bunch of good highlights, like John Collins posterized Bismack Biyombo.
Put him in a headlock and then dunked on.
And then Keontae, like I said, I personally find it very fun to watch Keontae not shoot very well, but throw a bunch of crazy passes around the floor because Jazz don't have a player who can really do that very well. You said B-?
Yeah, I think a B-.
Okay, I'm
fun factor.
I'm gonna go with a B just because it's so much of an improvement over last week.
I'll give you the B. Let's just go with a B. I think that's fine. And you know what I will say? The most enjoyable play to watch in basketball, this sounds so snooty, is a great pass. It is the one that gets everyone most excited because usually it leads to like a dunk or something. You know, the John Collins dunk was certainly probably the highlight of the week, but like the guys in the NBA who throw crazy passes all the time, they are the most fun to watch, I think, consistently, because you don't get to posterize somebody every game. Mm-mm. But you can throw 3 or 4 great passes a game, and it's more exciting than alley-oops now because alley-oops are so common, and three-point shots because three-point shots are so common, where in the 90s that was like put it on the, NBA inside stuff, top 10 plays. It was the only place you could watch it on Saturday mornings. You see those every night. So the great passes that not everyone can make are really, really fun. And Keontae throws a lot of those. So that's a good sign for the Jazz and their watchability factor, and Keontae George belongs in that conversation. All right, let's do a quick look around the NBA. We don't need to spend too much time on this before we get to the Q&A. Clippers can't win on the road, including in Utah.
Can't win at all.
I think they're the only winless team on the road so far right now. Maybe there's another team, but yeah, winless on the road. And they lost at home to the Grizzlies with James Harden. Just truly dreadful.
Yeah, James Harden is averaging 13 points a game on not good efficiency since suiting up for the Clippers. And last week we called it a lose-lose trade. And even though Philadelphia is looking good, I don't think that has anything to do with the new pieces they got from the Los Angeles trade.
No, I think getting the monkey off their back was probably helpful. But no, it's not because they got a bunch of great stuff in return. Maybe the draft picks in the future gives them a little flexibility to add somebody else. Maybe that's a win.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not looking good over there in LA. They're slowly falling to the bottom of the West because they have not picked up a win yet. Right now, they're outside the playoff picture. Again, only 9 games played. But there's a lot of other fun things happening around the NBA as well. The Minnesota Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert are third in the West right now, 7-2. They're looking really good. And also, I would say Rudy's probably looking the best that he has in a while, at least in Minnesota so far early this season.
Right now, he's probably the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. I thought Brook Lopez would win it this year, but the Milwaukee Bucks have not been very good. We can talk about Dame here in a moment, but you've got really good defensive players all over that Timberwolves lineup. Enough that they can actually mask Karl Anthony Towns being a bad defensive player, and you utilize him by being tall, but not by being a rim protector, because they have an elite rim protector in Rudy. They have great length with Jalen McDaniels. You have a terrific defender in the backcourt with Anthony Edwards, and then you've got enough guys like Mike Conley who just have corporate knowledge of how to play defense, where to be, how to not make mistakes that are going to cost you. And they are the top defensive team in the NBA. They've got length, they've got athleticism, they try hard, they want to win on that end. Does it work in the playoffs? We don't know with Rudy Gobert every year. It's a major question, but you don't have to use him the way Quinn Snyder used him. He doesn't have to play that way. And if they try and do something different and can still get kind of secondary rim protection while still defending on the perimeter, which is what Quinn Snyder failed at, Timberwolves can win. I said they're going to host a playoff series. They might host 2.
Yeah.
They are really, really good.
They're on a 6-game win streak right now.
They're good. And they've beat good teams. Great test this weekend, like I mentioned. They'll play Golden State tonight, who's shorthanded. But the Suns tomorrow, second out of a back-to-back with the fully loaded Suns. I'm going to sit down and watch that game as a basketball dork. Suns are 4-6, but yeah, they get their big 3 back tomorrow night. That's exciting. 76ers playing well. We touched on that. Dame. 22, 4-4. From afar, the numbers look okay. But he's shooting below 40% from the floor, below 30% from the three-point line. Just no rhythm.
Yes, and the defenses look bad still. We knew when you're trading Jrue Holiday for Damian Lillard, you're going to have an offensive bump and a defensive drop. But
they haven't gotten the offensive bump, unfortunately.
I was about to say the defensive drop has been much more noticeable than any offensive bump, if there even has been one so far. Because like you said, he's just putting up 22 points a game, which is great, but not usually what we expect from Damian Lillard. I think, what is Dame, around 33, 34 years old? And last year he had his best year, debatably, in the NBA.
Yeah.
Granted, he spent every single year of his career with Portland. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to his system. But not looking good early. Denver and Dallas are the top of the West right now. You expect Denver to be there, but Dallas is still streaking. They are on a 2-game win streak. I feel like I'm sort of waiting for that to collapse. Yeah, I don't know.
They're going to be a good offensive team.
Yeah, they are.
They should be. They really threw in the towel last year. They tried to lose a bunch of games, and it was a disaster. I like some of the additions they made in the offseason. I thought Grant Williams was good. I know a lot of people didn't like Christian Wood. They got him off the team. He's on the Lakers now and has been so-so. So maybe they were relying too much on him. Hey, quickly before we move off of Dame, his best game so far this season was Game 1. They beat Philly. Philly has not lost since, which is great. Dame scored 39 points, went full Dame time in the fourth quarter. I remember tweeting out, there's a reason nobody knows what Jrue time is. Jrue Holiday couldn't do that. It's true, but he could do a lot of other things, and we have not seen Dame follow it up all that well. He has had 2 30-point games since then. So we will see. He's got to figure it out. He's just got to figure out what to expect every night, and I think he'll come around. But no, the defense is not going to be a plus for him there. But Denver's going to stay good. Not having Jamal Murray is probably going to wear on Nikola Jokic a little bit, though. He's out for the rest of the month. Jamal Murray is with a hamstring injury. You don't want to tax too much on Nikola Jokic. Even though he makes it look easy, he's still playing extra minutes. He's still taking extra shots. He's still having to handle the ball more. Those are things that could end up costing you when you get to the postseason if it's too much.
Right now, the Boston Celtics are second in the East. They're 8-2. What do you think about Jrue Holiday over there? I mean, he's been playing decent, right? He's bringing the defense that they need up top. but he's only averaging 13 points a game, a drop off from about 20 last year with Milwaukee. Do you think it's just they don't need Drew to bring as much offense as he was asked to do in Milwaukee? Or
Yeah, especially now that they have Kristaps.
Yes.
And Kristaps has looked like a very nice piece for the Celtics when he's like the third or the fourth best scoring option and doesn't have to be one or two, which he's been elsewhere. The important part for Drew Holiday is he's shooting 45% from the floor and 36% from three. Last year, Marcus Smart for the Celtics shot 41% and 33%. Like that 5% bump from the floor and from the three-point line, that can win you a playoff series.
Yes.
I mean, you lose to the Miami Heat in the conference finals in Game 7. Like, you're talking about one or two baskets changing the outcome of the series, and those might be Marcus Smart shots that are now Drew Holiday shots, and they go in 5% more, but that's 1 of 20. You take 100 shots a game, okay, that matters. So maybe that's where he's really going to be most important there. So I still believe in Boston. Still, I think Boston's the best team in the East.
Yes.
I've changed my opinion. I thought it was going to be Milwaukee. Boston has looked like the best. I get Philly's playing well. I don't fully believe in Philly's ability to win in the playoffs.
Really quick, we can talk about the 76ers, then move on to the mailbag. Like you said, they lost their first game of the season to Milwaukee and have won 8 straight since. Joel Embiid is looking like MVP Joel Embiid again. And Tyrese Maxey, perhaps the surprise of the year so far, probably the front runner for most improved player, puts up a 50-point game the other night. And he's basically looking like James Harden's replacement, even though he was there.
You're always happy to move on from those guys when you have the next player waiting, and
Yes.
Tyrese Maxey was the next player waiting. So let's get to the mailbag. We always appreciate you following us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, at Chandler Holt KSL, or at KSL Sports. I send out this prompt every Tuesday asking for your Jazz questions. You can reply. We had a bunch last week. Only have 2 today, but I think Jazz fans are feeling a little more comfortable about this team than they were even a week ago when there was nothing but questions about how quickly is this team falling and failing and what can we do to fix it. So let's get to them real quick.
First up, from Curtis Harmon, does the winner of the in-season tournament get any future benefit as far as appeal to free agents?
I don't think so. But you know what? I mean, if you're a rookie minimum, or if you're an NBA minimum guy, depending on veteran or rookie status or whatever, you're making between, $1 million and like $2.5 million or what the veterans get paid. A $500,000 bump is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for anybody for winning one game specifically. Now you got to win 4 or 5 games leading up to it, but I guess it's 6 games leading up to it. But $500,000 is not a small amount of money for these guys still. Even LeBron said he was excited to win $500,000 if they can after they beat, I think, the Suns in their first cup game. So it matters. And I guess in that sense, if you're a veteran and you're saying, well, I can only get, the Houston Rockets can pay me a little bit more to be on this team, but I can make up $500,000 of that $1 million by going and playing on a team that's going to win the cup or has a chance to win the cup. I guess maybe. That could be a boost, and I haven't thought about that. That's a really good question, Curtis.
Yeah, I think that it may take a few years to see the trends of the in-season tournament. Like, will it turn into a thing where contenders sort of aren't really trying as hard, so they don't have to play the extra games, and they can just focus on the regular season and getting to the playoffs?
Does the NBA keep it around?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's something that could potentially, maybe in a few years, it turns out to be like it's always the younger teams that are hooping their butts off in order to get into Vegas and play on that stage. But I would say right now, no, but it could turn out to be like that in the future.
And money is a driver.
Yes.
If people want to play somewhere where they can get more money or maybe make up some of that difference, and you look at it and say, well, I don't get the signing bonus here that I was going to get, or I dropped a signing bonus a little bit, or not even a signing bonus, I should say like a roster guarantee, and I will drop my roster guarantee to a lower number because I'm on a team that I think can win the cup and make up $500,000 where my roster bonus was supposed to be $500 and I dropped it to $200 or something like that. So, yeah, there's an option for that, Curtis. I think that's a very good question. Thank you for sending that in.
Next up, from Cash Merrill, how long does it take someone like Keontae to get to Jamal Murray or De'Aaron Fox's level? Like 3 years? I kind of feel like I am a long ways out from this team being super competitive. Still fun to watch them develop, but being realistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little all over the board. Like, I don't think he's going to be as good as Donovan Mitchell was early. Donovan was so good. He was in the running for Rookie of the Year, probably should have won it, and then really never stopped being good. Was good enough to win you a playoff series his first year in the NBA. Not many guys can say that, and Donovan Mitchell was good enough to do that. So some guys do it quickly. Jamal Murray, how long did it take him? He really had his breakout in the bubble.
Yes.
Was truthfully, and that was like 7 years into his career, 6 years into his career. So it can take that long. De'Aaron Fox, I don't think we totally knew, he can score, but is he good?
Yeah.
He is good. And he showed on last year's team, he can be a player that scores a lot on a team that can actually win games. That's valuable. I actually think the name you brought up already is probably what you're hopeful of, which is Tyrese Maxey.
Yes.
Right? Tyrese Maxey is going to make an all-star team this year, most likely. He's playing the best ball of his career, and you can look at all the stats, but it's actually not that big of a surprise for people who watch the league every night because Tyrese Maxey in his second season was a full-time starter and was averaging 17 points a game, and was shooting 48% from the floor and 43% from three. Like, Tyrese Maxey's been a baller for the last 2 seasons. His second year in the NBA, I mean, he was unreal good on a team that people thought was competing for a title, and he was the starting point guard. And last year, he didn't start 19 games, and some of that was because James Harden got in the way and gunked it all up. But he still shot 48% from the floor and 43% from three and scored 20 points a game. So, I think optimistically he's as good as Tyrese Maxey next year, and he's a better passer. Again, it's impact. It's not style of play. Tyrese Maxey has a huge impact on the game. I think you can get a very high impact on the game from Keontae George as soon as next season. And Tyrese Maxey, his first year, averaged 8 points, shot 46% from the floor and 30% from three, and still there was enough signs that you're like, yeah, he should start next year. I think that's where you are with Keontae.
Yeah, and if you're looking at De'Aaron Fox's stats, I think the 3 years mark is maybe a pretty good line because De'Aaron broke the 20-point mark for the first time in his third season, but he wasn't an all-star until his sixth season, so I think it sort of depends. You can have an impact without being a top player in the NBA, but I would say 2 or 3 years for him to start looking like maybe what Jazz fans would want from him eventually, maybe an 18-8 season or something like that in his second or third year.
Yeah, and you know what? He might never be an all-star. Jamal Murray has never made an all-star team, and he is the second best player on the title.
Yeah.
And guess what? Every single NBA player most likely would trade their title or their all-star, an all-star nod for a title.
Yes.
Now you want to get the max deal that comes with being an all-star, and generally that happens. To be fair, Jamal Murray has his money. He does get paid quite handsomely and has a Supermax, I think, deal, or has one of the the high-level deals. So he's fine. So he's in a very good spot. You don't have to be an all-star. You don't have to be, Devin Booker. And then it gets an interesting conversation. Who's had a better career, Jamal Murray or Devin Booker? Devin Booker's got a 70-point game, made a bunch of all-star teams. He was all-NBA second team last year. Maybe he's all-NBA first team, whatever. Doesn't have a title.
Mm-hmm.
Jamal Murray has a ring. The second best player on what you play for.
Yes.
The second best player on a title team. It's pretty good. I would probably take what Jamal Murray's done. And they're going to retire with very similar money. Maybe it's $50 million difference. At some point, what's the difference between $450 and $400 million? Probably not a lot. And you get that title, and you're still in the conversation for being one of the best shooting guards during your era. Maybe you don't make the Hall of Fame. Maybe that's a big enough difference there. But yeah. Year 2, year 3, it's not necessarily about accolades. Are you able to be on the floor full time? Are you impacting the game in a positive way? You can do that by year 2. Tyrese Maxey showed you can do that.
Yes. Thank you guys for tuning into the Jazz Notes podcast. We will be back next Tuesday after the Jazz play 3 home games, one of them being their first home in-season tournament game tonight against the Portland Trail Blazers.
And if you wanted to get a question in, still reply to either the tweet that I sent out at Ben's Hoops on Twitter, or I sent out a prompt. I will do that today as well on Threads, so follow us on Threads at KSL Sports. Ask your Jazz questions, and I will actually answer them in an article that I write before the end of the week. So if you have a question that didn't get addressed, maybe you didn't want to talk about it on a podcast, I will answer your question there and try and respond as I can, and I will write a whole article on it at kslsports.com. So follow us on Threads at KSL Sports. You can also follow us on Twitter. Find me at Ben's Hoops. Find Chandler at Chandler Holt KSL, and catch all of our coverage at kslsports.com.